Hello, today we're going to continue working on what we started yesterday, which yesterday was our distance time graph. So now we're going to look a little closer at the concepts that we started talking about yesterday, which is our rate of change and how we calculate it and what it means. So just as a warm-up, I want you to have a look at these graphs. There's 4 graphs to choose from for each example, and I want you to think about which one makes the most sense and then determine your answer. So the first one says, a bicycle valve's distance from the ground as a boy rides at a constant speed. So we've got distance from the ground on this being the y-axis, right? So the y-axis is your distance from the ground, and then your x-axis is the time elapsed. So things to think about when you're choosing which graph makes the most sense is this is a valve on a bicycle tire. And we're asking about the distance it makes from the ground. So first of all, does the valve on the bicycle tire ever actually touch the ground? That's the first thing to think about. The other thing to think about is, does the valve on the bicycle tire change heights as it's going around the wheel? So pause the video, have a look at your choices, and think about which one makes the most sense. So B, it happens to be the correct graph because there's a couple things that make it the correct graph. See how here, the distance from the ground, it never touches the ground, but it gets close to the ground, and it also comes back to the same point every time. So if you think about that valve being at the lowest point on the tire, it's always going to come back to that lowest point on the tire each time. And then up here, we have it also consistently getting to the top of the tire and never going above the top of the tire either. And so we've got the time that it takes for it to go, here we are, from the bottom of the tire to the top of the tire, and then it goes back down to the bottom of the tire. So the next one says, a child swings on a swing as a parent watches from the front of the swing. So we're talking about, now we have the distance from the parent. So we've got a kid on a swing, and they're swinging away from their parent. So one would like to think that at no point will the parent and the child connect, because otherwise that will really hurt the parent. So have a look at each of these graphs and just give it some thought. We've got a kid swinging on a swing. So a kid swinging on a swing isn't necessarily going to follow as nice an exact pattern as our tire did here, right? Because we got a kid swinging on a swing, they aren't necessarily going to have the exact same travel every time they swing. So have a look at these 4 graph choices, give it some thought, pause the video, make your choice. So the most appropriate choice is A, because if you think that this is how far away the child is from the parent when it starts, and then it, if you remember how to swing on a swing, the first thing you usually do is kick your feet back, and then you swing forward, and then you start pumping, and then your swing gets a little bigger. And as the swinging gets bigger, that child's going to get a little closer to the parent without ever connecting with the parent. So the next thing we're going to look at, which will help us with thinking visually about rates of change, is we're going to talk about ramp inclines. And there are actual building codes that dictate the proper vertical height to horizontal distance. So a standard wheelchair ramp has an incline recommendation of 1 to 12. So it means that for every 1 inch of rise, there needs to be 12 inches of run. Or vertical rise, if the rise is 1, the horizontal distance is 12. And so the rate of change is 1 over 12. So for exterior ramps in climates where ice and snow are common, we wouldn't know any place like that as I sit inside and watch the snow outside. The incline should be more gradual. So this, if you wanted to think about it, this could be for the 1 to 12 could be for a ramp that is inside of a building, where the 1 to 20 is one that's more appropriate for something that is outside of the building, particularly in our northern climate. So it means that for every 1 inch of rise of this ramp, there needs to be 20 inches of horizontal distance or 20 inches of run. And so our rate of change is 1 over 20, or rise over run. So of course, for every rule, there must be an exception. So it says for unusually strong wheelchair users or for motorized chairs, you can have a ramp that has more of an incline, so it's 1 to 10. So what this is saying is that for every 1 inch of rise, you can have as low as 10 inches of run or horizontal distance. So that rate of change is 1 over 10. Now it says the steepest ramp, so even if you're not thinking about wheelchair access, but just not putting in stairs, should not have an incline exceeding 1 to 8. So that means that for every inch of rise, you should have no more than 8 inches of run. Sorry, I meant to say that means no less than a 1 to 8 incline. So the rate of change would be 1 over 8. So now we've got 4 different clients here that we're going to think about. One of them, client A, lives in a split-level townhouse. He owns a very powerful motorized chair. He wishes to build a ramp that leads from his sunken living room to his kitchen on the next level. So what kind of a ramp do you think he could build? Do you think he could build number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4? Keeping in mind, yes, he has a very powerful motorized chair, but he also wants to make sure that it's still safe for everyone else. So before we make our choice, let's look at client B. He requires a ramp that leads from, from her back deck to a patio. She's of average strength and operates a manual chair. We've got client C, who lives in Sudbury, where ice and snow are a factor. She's healthy, but not particularly strong. Her house is a single-level bungalow, but the front door is above ground, so she's going to need a ramp to her front door. And client D will not get approval because the design of his ramp is too dangerous. So let's have a look at our ramp choices and put 1 in each one. So I'd like you to think that you can put number 1 here in as your choice for this is too dangerous a ramp. We don't have a lot of run, right? So we don't have a lot of horizontal run for quite a steep rise. So we're going to say that client D has ramp 1. We're going to say that client C is going to have the most run, so the longest horizontal distance, for the shortest rise because of all that ice and snow being a factor. So we're going to say that ramp 2 is going to go for client C. Client B is a manual wheelchair user, so she's going to want to have more run than someone who is using a power chair. So we're going to say that client B is going to get ramp 3. And then client 4, A, because it's in his house, so we don't have to worry about ice and snow. B, he uses a power chair. And so we're going to give him option 4 because he's got the most rise for the given run. So now we have some dot graphs here, and we've got houses drawn in them, and we want to calculate the pitch of each roof. So let's look at this house first. So we're going to look at the pitch of the roof. So the pitch of the roof is the slanted part, right? So we're going to look just at that slanted part, and we're going to say, well, what's the rise and what's the run? So we're going to count dots. So the rise in this case is 2. And the run in this case, if we count dots over, we start here and we have 1, 2, 3 dots over. So we have a run of 3. So we can say that the pitch of that first house is 2 to 3. So now we're going to look at the pitch of the second house, which is very clearly quite a bit steeper. This is one of those A-frame houses. Now you have to remember that we're only looking at the pitch of the roof. And so the pitch is from the top to the bottom, right? So when we're thinking about the run of the roof, it's only half of the building. It's not the entire building. So you got to cut that building in half when you calculate your run. So counting the dots, the rise of this pitched roof is 22 and the run is 6. So that means that our slope or our pitch or rise over run will be 22 over 6. Well, I hope you understand and recognize that that's a fraction that can be reduced. So we can divide the top and the bottom by 2. So we're going to reduce that to lowest terms so that we have a pitch on our roof of 11 to 3. So here we have 2 more houses. So we'll count the pitch on the first house, which will start here. And we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is our run. So that's the bottom of our fraction. And then our rise is only 1. So for a rise of 1, we have a run of 5. And now this building, we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 run, but we don't have any rise. So our rise is going to be 0. So if all 4 roofs were placed on the same foundation, which roof would be the most expensive to build, with the hint that steeper roofs require more building materials? So that means that which roof is the steepest? So which roof has the largest rise over run? So we've got a rise over run of 2 over 3 on the first house, 11 over 3 on the second house, 1 over 5 on the third house, and 0 over 8 on the last house. So if we take all of those fractions and turn them into decimals, we can more easily compare which one is steeper. So here we have our ratios changed to numbers and decimals so that we can compare and see which one is the bigger number, which one has the steeper pitch. So the 2 over 3 is 0.67, 11 over 3 is 3.67, 1 over 5 is 0.2, and, oh, sorry, that was supposed to be 0 over 8, is 0. So therefore we know that the largest number has the steepest pitch. So that was that A-frame building that had a really steep roof. That's going to be the most expensive building to put a roof on. So the last question here is, why do you think apartment buildings have flat roofs? And what is the rate of change of a flat roof? Well, if you think about how big apartment buildings are, especially in relation to a house, they're quite a bit, they have a much larger footprint on the ground, or they cover a much larger area of the ground, which would require a lot of roof. Even with only a little bit of pitch on that roof, it would require a lot more roof than a flat roof, because the rate of change of a flat roof is 0, which means that there is no height, right? There is no change. There's no rate of change. So in the wintertime, snow builds up on roofs. Sometimes if the snow builds up too high, the roof may become damaged. Which do you think would be the best roof for an area that gets a large amount of snow, and why? Well, think about how heavy snow is, and which of these roofs do you think would be the best one? So this doesn't have a lot of pitch, and so what it means is it will have a lot of snow collecting on the roof. This one, it'll be harder for the snow to collect on the roof, but this one, it'll be almost impossible for that snow to collect on the roofs. I don't know if any of you have been up north, but these A-frame houses tend to be a little more common way up north. So this chart is going to remind you of how to change percents to decimals and fractions. So percent grade, if we have a 1% grade, how do we change 1% into a fraction? Well, remember that percent means of 100. So 1% is just 1 over 100. And so what's the rise? Well, the rise is 1. The run is 100. And then what is the rate of change in decimal form? Well, how do you change that percent into a decimal? You divide this number by 100. And so the percent the rate of change in decimal form is 0.01. So there only is one tiny change from the charts that you've done before that you all did very well with, where you had a percent, change it to a fraction, or make it a decimal, or any other way in between there. So when we have a rise of 1 and a run of 50, that gives us a fraction of 1 over 50. So if we turn that fraction into a decimal, it's 0.02. And then, of course, to change a decimal to a percent is we take our decimal and we multiply it by 100. So in this next one, this time we're given a rate of change in decimal form. So let's change that to a percent first. So we have 0.035 as a decimal. We're going to change that to a percent, which is going to give us 3.5%. Now to change a percent to a fraction, remember we can put it over 100, but also remember we don't like decimals in our fractions. So to take our 3.5 over 100 and turn that into a fraction that doesn't have decimals in it, we multiply the top and bottom by 10, and we end up with 35 over 1,000. Well, once we have our fraction, we have our rise and our run. I'm hoping that you see this is pretty easy, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the rest of this chart to do as a worksheet for today.